people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Okay, we'll start with this. It was officially announced earlier today that former champion Sandy Ryan will be making her next ring appearance on the undercard of Josh Warrington versus Lee Wood 2, opposite the ring seasoned veteran Carla Zamora of south of the border for what is the newly vacated WBC super lightweight title. The one that Chantel Cameron chose to abandon in protest of 3-minute rounds for a women's boxing match, what most people interpret as a veiled effort to avoid fighting Sandy Ryan, since Chantel has never been all that vocal about that added minute in a round. And she was under orders to fight Sandy. Upon being elevated to full WBC champion, shortly after that, the World Boxing Council ordered her to fight Sandy. So a lot of people out there are not believing that she chucked that belt over 3-minute rounds. She did it to avoid Sandy Ryan, who's a lot better than her record suggests, sporting a professional record of 8 wins with 3 losses and 1 draw, 3 knockouts. Having never been knocked out in 12 professional bouts, one might argue that Chantel is the more decorated fighter of the two, arguably more proven, but whatever the case, something about Sandy made her squirrely. So now Sandy is fighting Carla Zamora, who sports a professional record of 12 wins with 10 losses and 2 draws, 4 knockouts, having been knocked out only once. In 24 professional bouts, another fighter who's a lot better than advertised and better than her record suggests, the crown jewel of Carla Zamora's resume is when she traveled to Canada for Jessica Kimura and stopped her in the 4th round of a contest scheduled for 8. Solid wins over Jessica Kimura, former champion Erica Farias, who she stopped in the 5th round of a contest scheduled for 8, and a split draw with former world title challenger Marie-Pierre Huel, currently coming off a win over Bonnie Hunter in August of this year. It's the only fight that Carla had this entire calendar year, whereas Sandy fought 2 times this year, last in action in September opposite the ring of then unbeaten Jade Grierson, who she thoroughly outclassed over 10 rounds. What this represents is Sandy's opportunity to become a 2-weight world champion. She once held the WBO title at welterweight. Now she can become the WBC champion at junior welter. What she's got to do is be careful to not take Carla Zamora lightly, because she's better than her record suggests and more dangerous. She's been around a long time, and she's been in there with a lot of good fighters, some of which she beat. So the win is not a given. Don't take her for granted. And what else this fight represents is Matchroom's continued effort to not just promote Sandy Ryan, but promote women's boxing. Some have felt that Matchroom has scaled down efforts to promote the women, where not that long ago, they were the authority on women's boxing, hosting a robust stable of Valkyries, many of which now have migrated over to MVP, but Sandy Bryan still remains. One of my personal favorites, Sandy Ryan, is one of those fighters that's made for TV. You're not going to see Sandy Ryan in a boring fight, win or lose. She's entertaining and she's spiteful. I believe that she will beat Carla Zamora. It's just a question of how. I anticipate a points decision, a points win. Sandy is a multifaceted fighter. She's got a lot of dog in her, but when she has to, she can move and punch. She can box to out-hustle her opponent. Should she become WBC champion, the other 3 alphabet titles at the weight are still held by Katie Taylor, who people question whether or not she's going to continue, since she doesn't need to. She's completed boxing, and maybe what super lightweight needs right now is for Katie to bow out and start the process over. Hit the reset button on this weight class. A changing of the guard. It begins with Sandy, as Sandy Ryan would represent the next wave of super lightweight champions after Katie Taylor bows out. Look for the ring return of Sandy Ryan early next year on the undercard of Lee Wood versus Josh Warrington 2. In men's heavyweight news, unbeaten up-and-comer Moses Itauma on the business of boxing and his own meteoric rise, Manchester, England. Moses Itauma has enjoyed a meteoric rise since he turned pro less than 3 years ago, but the past few months have taught the 20-year-old plenty about the patience required of an elite heavyweight. Itauma turned pro as a prodigiously talented teenager and quickly set his sights on beating Mike Tyson's record and becoming the youngest heavyweight champion in history. The quest wasn't a publicity stunt. If the right opportunity had presented itself, Itauma's team wouldn't have hesitated to snatch it. Itauma, 13-0 with 11 KOs, will turn 21 on December 28th, and, almost inevitably, things have slowed down. The heavyweight division has been in hibernation whilst unified champion Oleksandr Usyk decides how he wants to bring his outstanding career to an end. Potential opponents have also woken up to just how dangerous a fight with Itauma can be.
Frank and Georgie have a robust stable of heavyweights, and Moses Itauma is in many ways the crown jewel among all of them. That's their foot in the door of the future.
There are a few unbeaten up-and-comers coming through today's heavyweight division, but Moses Itauma is the standout of all of them. Fighters who have once sneered at the prospect of fighting an unproven teenager suddenly want well compensating for their time or are content to wait for the world title picture to clear up before accepting this assignment.
What is always the earmark of how risky a fight is or how risky a fight isn't, what is a fighter willing to accept?
What kind of money do you have to kick out to these other guys at heavyweight to share the ring with Moses Itauma?
Because depending on what that number is, that'll tell the story. Remember that he's only 21 with 13 fights. Ask for too much and it's obvious you're scared.
Itauma has boxed 2 times this year, scoring quick knockouts of Mike Balogun and Dillian Veit, and is preparing to box fringe contender Jermaine Franklin at Manchester's Co-op Live Arena on January 24th. The fight will be broadcast by DAZN. Itauma is still at the learning stage of his career, and 2025 has taught him plenty about how the sport works outside the ropes. In these last couple of months, I actually wouldn't really say I've learned how much boxing is a business, but more how many business-minded people are in the sport, if that makes sense, he told The Ring. I think at the end of the day, to a core, like boxing is, I guess, still a sport. It's just the fact that there are so many businessmen trying to make money out of it. I probably would say, yeah, there's a lot more contracts, a lot of talk, a lot of smoke than when I first started as a professional. Usyk, Anthony Joshua, and Tyson Fury remain the most high-profile heavyweights on the planet, but Itauma is widely regarded as the heir apparent.
So he's got Jermaine Franklin in front of him, and I really like that fight for Moses Itauma because if nothing else, Jermaine Franklin is well-traveled, durable, and he's not there to lay down. He didn't want to lay down with Dillian or Anthony Joshua. I don't think he's there to lay down with Moses.
Jermaine Franklin, the hard-nosed American who's got quick counters and combinations on the inside, is a durable fighter that's never been knocked out. So, if Moses can be the first to do it, that's a nice feather in his cap. And thankfully, the fight between Moses and Jermaine is not being billed as a pay-per-view like the Dillian Veit fight was, what I felt was a mistake. Moses is still developing.
He's not yet in a place where his fights should be behind a paywall. He should get to develop as the audience watches so that the audience can then grow over time.
So it's done, and he isn't surprised at just how rapidly he has developed into such a significant factor in the sport's glamour division. Like I said, when I first started pro, I wanted to be a world champion by age 20. He said matter-of-factly, I'm not surprised at all.
It's the funniest thing because Dillian Whyte beat Jermaine Franklin, the same Dillian Whyte that Moses Itauma stopped in a round. But I happen to think that Jermaine Franklin can do a bit better than Dillian did. Boxing math is funny like that.
That even though Dillian beat Jermaine and Moses beat Dillian, Jermaine may be able to last a bit longer with Moses than Dillian did. We'll see. I do like Moses Itauma to win the fight, and I may even pick him to win the fight by way of knockout, but we'll see. Beyond that fight with Jermaine Franklin, if Moses is successful, Murat Gassiev, WBA regular champion, awaits. You remember Murat Gassiev, unified champion at cruiser, WBA regular champion at heavy, who was in action not but a few weeks ago opposite the ring's seasoned veteran Kubrat Pulev, who he stopped. According to a WBA ruling, Moses Itauma is the mandatory challenger to Murat Gassiev's WBA regular title. So as soon as Moses wants to have that fight, Murat Gassiev will have to oblige him.
It's a pretty good fight, too.
Murat Gassiev moved up to the heavyweight division following his loss to Alexander Usyk in the cruiserweight division, and he's been up there as of 2020 for roughly 5 years and 8 fights. So by now, he's fully acclimated to that weight. He's a heavyweight, representing a respectable sequence of fights for Moses Itauma, who, remember, is only 21 years old with 13 professional fights, and he's already fighting the likes of a Jermaine Franklin, potentially a Murat Gassiev after that. That's a respectable sequence of fights for a guy so young.
And the assignment would be somewhat similar for Moses in both fights because Jermaine Franklin, like Murat Gassiev, is a close quarters fighter, a mid-range to inside fighter that you don't really want to sit there with those guys in the pocket. To disarm Murat Gassiev and his devastating power, you have to beat your feet and you have to use your jab. That's how Usyk beat him, that's how Otto Wallin beat him, and that's how Moses has to beat him, using his boxing and not just brute force, and certainly not just selling out within close quarters. Do that, and you may catch one of his devastating left hooks.
He's won 7 out of his 8 fights by way of knockout. The only guy he didn't knock out as a heavyweight is Otto Wallin. And the only reason Otto didn't get knocked out is because he spent the fight moving away from Murat Gassiev, boxing him up. Moses has to adopt a similar strategy if and when the time comes. It's Moses' fight to take, after all. If Moses wants the shot, Murat has to give it to him.
Future is looking bright for young Moses Itauma, who has a very entertaining sequence of fights ahead of him, formidable adversaries as he climbs up to the upper echelon of the heavyweight division, and I look forward to seeing his development.
So I actually quite like the fact that we got some rounds because got a chance to work with a new team, and all in all, it was a wonderful experience for us. I mean, AJ made a fortune. His star power in the US has gone through the roof. I mean, if you take any notice the internet right now, I mean, he's just become like an icon, especially amongst the ladies, which he's been an icon over here amongst the ladies for many decades, but now in the US as well. And people are kind of coming across him for the first time, which is quite strange when I see that on social media, you know, because obviously from here, he's one of the most recognizable figures in sport. So, yeah, wonderful experience. It ticks every box, right? Profile, money, activity. And it couldn't have gone better for us.
For me, that is confirmation of what I've been telling you here on the channel for years, that whether you like it or not, Anthony Joshua is still one of the biggest and most marketable names in all of world boxing. A fact that I think a lot of people resent, that even with the losses, he still commands a large audience and very large purses when you consider that at the time he accepts the Jake Paul fight and Netflix kicks out all this money for him to do it, he's coming off a knockout loss and a year of inactivity, and even with that, you still have to pay to play, and you have to pay well.
They got their money's worth. 33 million viewers to watch Anthony Joshua splatter a guy everybody knows he can beat.
This is a numbers game, and the proof is in the numbers. The proof, as they say, is in the pudding. I remember in the build-up, there were some who actually picked Anthony to lose. Rick Ramos, Oscar De La Hoya.
Why?
I interpret it as a form of resentment. There are some people out there that think Anthony just really isn't any good, and others who don't like that he's been Matchroom's golden goose. Their ace in the hole for so many years now.
Oscar.
Remember that when he was going to fight Francis Ngannou, there were people picking Francis Ngannou to win that fight. And if you can believe this, there were people picking Jake Paul to win this one. I think that's how deep the resentment stems.
The hate for Anthony Joshua, but what's the hate? He's been a great ambassador for the sport of boxing, carried himself with dignity in victory and defeat.
And he's the money. Whether you like it or not, I think Frank Warren doesn't like it, but he understands it, as now he's throwing two of his fighters' names in the hat for an Anthony Joshua fight, saying, you want to fight Moses Itauma, or fight Fabio Wardley. Of course he's going to say that, because he promotes the both of those guys, and he knows a fight between any one of them and Anthony makes for another big event, likely in the hopes that they will do to Anthony what his other boy did to Anthony. But the truth is, Anthony has outgrown fights with either a Moses Itauma or a Fabio Wardley. Fighting them profits him nothing, and frankly, he's got bigger fish to fry. Everything he does now is a precursor, a prelude to a Tyson Fury showdown, to where he doesn't have time to waste on Moses or Flavio. Those boys still have to make their bones.
Frank knows that.
But Frank has also been using Anthony's name for years to promote his own fighters, to siphon off some of Anthony's star power. So, of course, he's going to make that recommendation with no real expectation that Anthony will oblige them. What has turned out to be, all in all, a very successful endeavor, excursion, if you will, side quest. At the time that Anthony's offered a Jake Paul fight to stand in as a late replacement, he's got to be thinking to himself, this is an easy lick.
At the time that he's offered this fight as a late replacement, they've already made it their mission to deliver that Tyson Fury showdown in the coming calendar year, to where fighting Jake doesn't jeopardize it. Doesn't jeopardize it in the least bit. So you get to go out there, fight on a massive platform, make a massive purse
For an easy lick.
and I don't think the reception would have been the same if Gervonta Davis would have been allowed to go through with the fight. For Gervonta, it was an asterisk, a stain on what is supposed to be his legacy. Look at how much food you're leaving on the plate so you can play dancing bear for Jake Paul. Whereas with Anthony, it's different. Anthony didn't skip out on doing anything he needed to do by fighting Jake Paul.
He's not using Jake Paul as a retirement fund like Gervonta Davis was, and he still has big plans for real fights with real fighters in the coming calendar year. So the reception for one fight is very different than it would have been for the other. All in all, this has turned out to be a very successful endeavor for Anthony.
And that's why people are mad. There are some people out there, they just don't think he's that good, that he's not worthy of the audience that he commands, or worse. They hate Eddie Hearn, so they hate Anthony Joshua by proxy.
Silly, really.
But I've been saying it for years. Losses and all, even though he's not perfect, he's still one of the biggest stars in this entire sport, second only to Canelo Alvarez. Anthony is the money.
He's the fucking landlord, and he moves the needle in boxing in a way that most other boxers can't.